Hey, everybody, welcome to our first roundtable discussion. I'm delighted to have with us Gary Langley and Sally Taylor from its Soul Explorers podcast. And I met Gary a while ago. I don't even remember when we met through another interview that I was doing. I don't know what year that was, but have stayed connected with Gary on and off. And then he just wrote not too long ago to do an interview, and I met Sally and looked up and heard a little bit of her stories. And I thought, what a great two folks to do a roundtable discussion on the afterlife. So we're going to focus on that today. And first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you guys introduce yourselves to give a little background. If you want to share about your Soul Explorers podcast or how you came together, go ahead. So, whoever wants to go first, jump in.
Go ahead, Sally.
Okay, I was going to say the same, but Gary and I tend to think on the same lines of thinking anyway. Uh, I met Gary, through how many years has it been now, Gary? 4 years ago, maybe?
Not that long. Yeah.
Yeah, primarily on a Sunday meeting called the Global Gathering, which is done by Victor and Wendy Zamet in Australia. And at some point in those weekly group meetings, I I heard that Gary was supposed to be sitting in circle with a group of people who were sitting for a developing physical medium. And from that point on, we've kind of been joined at the hip, so to speak, even though primarily it's always been in this kind of situation online and in a Zoom room. So that's kind of my side of how we met. My personal story is I was raised Mormon and in a very large family, and that was my worldview for a very long time. Uh, as I became an adult, I started to reject that particular belief system and was agnostic at best. I didn't know what I thought or believed anymore.
Hmm.
But when my son passed in 2012, I had a sudden, I have to know what is left of my son that, you know, is real. That because he was so real to me in life, I couldn't believe he was no longer a being that I could connect to. And so I had to sort that out because I didn't have any kind of background beyond the religion that I was raised in. And that has taken me on a wild journey of lots of experiences, developing mediumship, traveling around the world to experience, what this life has to offer. And so here we are.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, Gary, now you're up.
Okay. Well, I think I've always been a seeker. And very early on, of course, I looked at the Christian religion because that's what was available to me. Um, but it always seemed to have a lot of holes in it for me. Just too many things they didn't explain or I thought were askew, not explained properly. Um, so I began to research in my teenage years, and now many years later, I'm still a researcher. I've had some profound experiences, so I went from curiosity to believing there was an afterlife to knowing there was an afterlife. And yes, when I met Sally, it's very funny because 5.5 years ago, a medium told me, "You're going to be doing a podcast." And I thought, no, probably not. But nice sentiment. And then Sally came to me and said, "I want to do a podcast, but I want to do it with you." And so things happen whether you want them to or not. And actually, I'm very glad because we're having a blast with the podcast and interviewing some wonderful people. Um, so my goal is to opened the door for people to know that there's no reason to fear, that life continues, death is not a reality. Yeah, the physical body dies, but that's not you. So that's my story.
Very good. So, why don't each of you share an experience that made you recognize that life does go on after leaving the physical body, that really opened your eyes that, wow, there's a lot more out there than I ever thought of? Sally, you want to go first?
Well, sure. I'll go ahead and pull it back to my son and his early graduation off the physical plane. Very, of course, as a parent, I was in deep grief. He transitioned by suicide, so that's a complex grief for most parents in that case. And one of the very first forms of communication I had from him was in the dream state.
Mm.
And it really just within days after his passing, he showed up and said, "You could not have prevented my death." And then it was over and he was gone. And then to add to that experience, just a couple of months after that, I was on our family farm staying in one of the cabins, and I had another dream visitation. And he said, "I'm sorry for the pain that I caused to all the people that love me."
Mm.
And those two experiences were so vivid and so visceral that that was really my first indicator that not only did he still exist, but that he could communicate. And so that led me then to further exploration and development.
So, did you have no idea until you had the dream that that could happen? Or was it a surprise to you? Or did you ask for that dream?
I was too deep a grief to know to ask for it at the time. Uh, so had I had experiences, spiritual experiences earlier in life? Yeah, I'd actually had a lot of them,
Mm.
but I only understood them in the context of the belief system that I had. And so, you know, I know that I've had other dream visitations, but my very first dream visitation that I can talk about, I was probably 13, 14 years old, and my little dog had died. And she popped up in a what I now can know to call a dream visitation. At the time, it was just this dream that I had. But again, I can still recall every moment of that visitation from when I was 13 years old. It sticks with you. That's one of the ways you know that it was a true visitation is you don't forget them. And so I had a little context, but at that stage, because again, I kind of dropped all of my beliefs that I had, um, I I didn't have an expectation of it. I just wanted to know, what was he still around or available in any kind of way? And those were the very first early indicators that he absolutely is and
So,
continues to be.
the Mormon belief system didn't have a context around the afterlife, or did
I
they
mean,
ever talk about it?
they never talked about after death communication, right? There's definitely a belief in the afterlife within the Mormon religion. Absolutely. Even into some very specifics of, how it's organized and how you get to the different levels. There was a lot of information in that religion to give you a belief in the afterlife, but belief is only your toe in the door, right? To have experiences is the thing that gives you conviction and the knowing that Gary talked about. So I'm all about the exploring and experiencing. And it's proven itself to be a reality to me over and over and over again now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because I mean, you can read all you want to about it and watch all the podcasts but until you have that experience, it's not real to you. And I think what you guys are doing with your podcast is maybe opening the eyes for people to maybe figure out how they can have their own experience as well. But it is life changing. All right, Gary, what about you? What is one of your favorite encounters with the afterlife?
Okay, so there were several, and surprisingly, they came as out-of-body experiences. Um, so I'll share one that was very profound, and that was a tipping of the scale. I would say that's where I went from, yeah, I believe in the afterlife, to yes, I know there's an afterlife. So take you back to September 6th of 1995. I was living on a camp which I later managed, but at that time I was working under the guy who had the job I later took over. Um, and he had his family living there on the camp as well. It's a camp and retreat center in the Sierra Mountains. September 6th, we watched his daughter, Melina, drive out for her first day of her senior year of high school. And we went about our day's work on the property. I went to my house, he went to his house, opposite ends of the property. That night I go to bed, and pretty quickly I feel a tingling sensation throughout my body. I see gold flecks of light, and I'm suddenly in what I would call, or I mean, I hate to put labels on things, but I would call it a lower astral plane, because it was like a dark city. You know, there were trash can fires and garbage, and I'm on a building top looking down on this. And I turn around, and I can only guess it was an angelic being who points to a little shed on the roof of this building. So I walk over to the shed and I open the door, and there, sitting on the floor, no furniture in this shed, was Melina, his daughter. And she looked at me and she said, "Hi, what are you doing here?" And I said, "I can't stay. I just want you to know you're loved." And I gave her a big hug. Okay, so I come back into my body, the gold flecks of light again, the tingling from head to toe. The next morning, her father comes over to my house, and we're about to start our workday. And as the morning's wearing on, I'm noticing concern on his face. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "We can't find Melina. She had driven out the morning of the 6th. This is now the morning of the 7th of September. And I knew immediately I had seen her on the other side. Um, and it wasn't until they flew a helicopter that day that they found the wreckage of her car upside down behind a hill. And she had, in fact, transitioned. The day I had that experience, there was no clue, no knowing that anything was amiss. Um, and that was really confirming and evidential for me, because I've never dreamed of her before or since, and it had a different quality than a dream. So I would say that was one of my most profound ones. I'll just skip back to a really quick one. Back in the early 80s, I had a girlfriend, and I said, "Oh, let's try and meet on the astral plane," we called it. Um, and so she went to her house, I went to my house. We gave ourselves suggestion as we went to sleep. And sure enough, we did meet on this little knoll in a clearing in the woods. And I told her, "Remember the surroundings." And the next day she came over and she said, "Okay, what were the surroundings?" And I started to describe it, and her face just dropped.
Mm.
She was speechless. She couldn't say anything. So those were two very evidential out-of-body experiences, that were, but I'd say the one surrounding Molina tipped the scale for me. I initially wanted to tell everyone, you know, "This is real, this is real." And I was getting that glassy-eyed look that people give you when it's like, "I don't want to go there." Um, so I learned to temper that a little bit, and only spread those seeds where they're invited. But so I would say that was a real tipping point for me. And that made me delve into spiritual study, the afterlife, all of the connected aspects of this, because I then knew it was a reality.
Very cool. Well, let's put a pin in the out of body experiences because I think that will be a really good future roundtable discussion. Um,
Sure.
but which reminded me of, and I've already shared a couple of my early ones with dreams and that kind of thing in the interview we did together. But one of my favorite is my mom had dementia, and this has to do with an out of body thing. And I would say it was about 2 months before she passed. And I was laying in bed and I felt this hand on my arm. And I heard her voice saying, I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye. So she got out of her body and came to me. Um, and it was the sweetest. I must have been out of the body too. I'm not sure because it felt so real. Because she crawled in and laid in bed with me and we just hugged. And I said, when it's time, go into the light, go see dad, and then the whole scene sort of turned into her, which I still hadn't figured out what it was. It was like she was reborn into a little baby. And I saw her like she was getting ready to be reborn or start a new life. And it was so lovely. And she died in 2021. And that was right in the height of COVID, and nobody was traveling anywhere. No, it was 2020. It was, in August of 2020. No one was traveling. I couldn't go home to her funeral, but she came to me to say goodbye. And it was a sweet, and it was an out of body experience. And then 6 days after she passed, she came to me in a dream, and we were in a kitchen. I was walking in a kitchen and there was water all over the floor, which represents emotions. And there's my mom. And she just looked at me and she smiled. It was visceral, like you said, Sally, of you knew that that wasn't just a dream. That was hey, I'm absolutely fine. But that was such a lovely gift because I couldn't go home for the funeral. And if I had gone, my whole family got COVID and I would have gotten it and I would have brought it back to Milt and that kind of thing. So it was good, but I got to say goodbye in such a different way instead of going to a funeral or a service or that kind of thing. And it was such a sweet gift. And I haven't heard from her since. I mean, I've felt her every once in a while, but it's like, we know we're all fine. You don't need to come back and visit me. You go do what you need to do, and I'll see you when I see you, kind of thing. So that was probably one of my most memorable. I've had several dream visits, and then of course being a medium, which is really interesting, is, when I had my spiritual awakening, for some reason it popped open my ability to see into the spirit world. It took me years to figure out, why am I seeing all this stuff in my head? Why am I seeing people walking around in buildings and they don't mean anything and there's no connection? For some reason, when I had my spiritual awakening and awakening to divine love, it created this vision into the spirit world, and it took me years to figure out that's what I was seeing. And so, Sally, I know you're a medium, correct?
I do fess up to that.
Yes. And do you do individual readings? Are you still doing that work, or?
I do them periodically. I have cut way back on the readings that I do, but I do them periodically. Mostly, this is going to sound strange. I told Gary this just the other day. If my son shows up with them and says, do this reading, then I do it. And so as a result, it's kind of what's brought to me rather than just kind of an open-ended, doing readings on a daily basis. But I would much rather place my time and my focus on teaching people their own connections than on doing the readings. As a medium, I do think mediumship is important to help people begin to recognize that they have the same capacity. So it's definitely a great tool, and it leads people towards their own experiences and their own development. But to me, that's a much more important thing for me to be spending my time on, is helping people recognize, what does spirit communication feel like? What does it look like? What many ways does it come through to you? And so, yeah, that's why I'm doing fewer readings now, but every now and then I still. And they're always amazing. It just floors me every time how they come through. And you were talking about having a lot of visuals. I assume do they feel like they're outside of you, Susan, or do they feel like they're imagery in your head?
It's imagery in my head. I don't see it
Yeah.
outside of me. I see it in my head. I don't see in full blown color. It's more like almost like a old black and white beginning television kind of thing. And I mean, we can go into somewhere down the road. There's other things that we could talk about that it's like, why am I seeing gnomes building and planting trees in the forest and they're going really fast? I don't know, out of meditation. I mean, there's still a lot after being in this for 30 years. And, there's still a lot I don't understand of why I see it that way. And why is that happening? Why am I seeing gnomes planting trees in the forest and going really quick? And why are they moving everything around? And why are there little builder men? I mean, it's like, no, I haven't taken LSD.
Right.
Why is this happening? But I'll figure that out at some point. But sorry,
Yeah.
got on off
No,
a
but that's
tangent.
exactly what I wanted to know was, how do you experience it? Because that's what's true for most people is that
Mhm,
it's a mental image or it's a mental hearing or just a knowing,
mhm,
those really subtle things. But that's why a lot of people really struggle to separate what their own thoughts are and their own experiences are from what's being brought to them. They,
mhm.
they use the brain very similarly to the way we use our brain, you know? It's a filter for that information. And so, yes, definitely I get pictures. Now, that said, we know there are those people who see objectively with their physical eyes, My father, not every day, all day, but he frequently saw people at their own funerals as if they were exterior to him, sitting in a, chair watching what was going on. So, there's different levels, I guess you would say, of seeing, different forms of seeing, but it's just one of the many ways they communicate. And sometimes it is, I always say it's like playing charades,
Mhm.
right? When you're seeing something, but you don't have words to go with it, or you don't know what the context of the story is. And so it is our job to then figure it out.
Right. Gary, did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you because I encounter a lot of people that are just approaching this information, just exploring, having a lot of fear around it, having a lot of fear about, oh, it's the other side. And I know this is partly perpetrated by Hollywood, um, because everything's got to be a scary movie. It can't be love and light and beauty. Um, who's going to watch that, right? Us. So, but I see a lot of people approach it with fear, and I just want to say there's absolutely nothing to fear about the other side. People worry about demons, and yeah, there are lower level spirits that may try and interfere, but they're harmless. They really can't hurt you unless you allow them in, and you're probably not going to encounter that. But I also wanted to say, in reading about it, it lays the groundwork because you mentioned earlier it's not the same as having a direct experience. But for me, it really laid a broad groundwork. And I looked at many different paths, religions, and saw and found what was similar in all of them. So that lays a good groundwork and begins to reroute your thought patterns a little bit. So then you open more to having an experience yourself, be it clairaudient, which I will sometimes get. And I've worked out a little system with them because my guides or angels or whoever is talking to me, because they've not identified that, will use terminology I would never use, or they will use my name, and I never think of myself by my name. It's me, I. So you begin to open the door. to have, because we're all having those experiences. I think we're all having them all the time, and we just think it's a passing thought. And it could be our guide planting an idea to help lead us in a better direction. And another thing I would say is, um, and I said this to a Christian friend recently who was really worried about demons. And I said, look, your guides will never tell you what to do. They'll give you advice, they'll encourage you, but the decision is always ultimately yours. If there is a being telling you what you must do, run. You know, that's what you want to stay away from. So,
Yeah, and that's a really interesting thought there, because one thing I've found out is that you can never make the experience happen. You can wish it and, oh, I want this to happen, and it never happens. It always happens when you're not thinking about it, not trying to make it happen. That kind of, it's more a surrender to, if it's supposed to happen, I'm willing, to do that. I think fear will stop people from having the experience, um, because they're afraid of it. And yet all the encounter is just someone that you knew and you loved. They're just not in a physical body anymore. Why would that love change because they went into physical form? So that's kind of interesting. And going back to Sally, when you're talking about the visual, when I do mediumship training, people say, but I don't see, I don't see, I don't see. And I said, well, use your imagination, because if you use your imagination of your loved one standing in front of you and you're talking to them, all of a sudden that imagination takes a life of its own, and you go, wait, I didn't think that. And you realize that they're right there with you. But imagination is the key to opening those visuals. So it's not like newbies trying to connect can see like we see, into those realms yet. But if they use the imagination, that's the opening the door to seeing. So I don't know if you guys have experienced that in that way.
That's how
I
I
think
teach it. Go ahead,
Oh,
Gary.
okay. Yeah. Okay.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say, I think it's important. Yeah, you can't hope for, I mean, you can hope for it, but I mean, you can't create it by doing that, the experience. But it is okay, and I think advisable to invite them
Mhm.
for an experience. As a medium friend of mine said, she was conversing with John F. Kennedy, and he said, we have all this that we want to share with you, but nobody's asking. Nobody's asking. So it's okay to ask.
Agreed. Agree. And I think that's an important step. What I love about, and I guess I can use the word love, is that oftentimes when we lose a loved one that we're close to or we know, it is an awakening, that it's a catalyst to wait, there's more. It gets us out of our third dimensional mind and go, oh gosh, there's a whole realm that I can explore, which is what happened for you, Gary, is that you go, I want to know why this happened, and why did it happen to me, and why is everybody looking at me like I'm crazy when I share the story? I mean, right now I'm so far past the no trespassing sign. It's not even funny that I'm willing to say, I don't even want to go back to that old world where we didn't know or didn't see or didn't experience. But I think what it does, it awakens us to the fact that that's who we are. We aren't these bodies. We're just residing. These are our little earth suits we're driving around, So yeah, so it's a catalyst to awakening. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And I think it is so important to pursue spiritual thought, just keeping, yeah, and so you touched on the word love, and I just want to say I've been looking for ways to kind of define the love that I talk about in these kind of conversations. And so I've come up with the word, it's objectless love. In other words, it's not directed at a person thing, but it encompasses all of that. So it's a different kind of love than we humanly think of. It's a state of being, as opposed to I love Sally, I love you, Susan. That's a different, that's an aspect of it, I think. So, but these things start to open up more and more the more you delve into and realize the truth that death is not an end. That's the root of all fear. So,
Yeah. Sally?
Yeah, well, I was going to go back to you're talking about the imagination and that getting people into a state where they can start to trust the actual things that are coming to them as opposed to from them. And I always tell people that it feels like your imagination. It does because they're using the same channels that you use when you use your imagination. And it's just starting to notice the subtle differences. I'm also an artist by background, so creativity is a big part of sort of my world and my life. Well, even that process is very often collaborative in nature. Artists talk about their muses all the time, right? We've that for millennia, artists have been talking about muses, whether they're visual artists or musical artists or writers or whatever. And that's because it is a collaborative process. We're not on our own in this world, but we have not been taught how to recognize that subtle influence and appreciate it and validate it. And once you start to do that, then the flow of it just, you know, it takes over. And you're living your life in a very different way. So yeah, I believe in addressing the imagination concept because a lot of people that's where they get stuck. Is this my imagination? Is it just because I want it? Is it or is it real? Eh, They eventually give you evidence that it's real.
yeah, and I think it's important to realize we're conditioned to think of imagination as not real. And imagination is a real function. It's a real experience. And so we have to just maybe shift our perspective on what imagination really is. And it is a doorway, I believe. And in fact, I just co-hosted an event the other night that the whole 2 hours was about utilizing imagination in connecting with the other side. So.
Very, very good. It reminds me of when we used to live in Florida and near Disney, and they would call their staff Imagineers. In some ways, we're Imagineers. We're little engineers of the imagination that have learned how to hone that ability to connect with the spirit world through the imagination. Um, I can remember a lady when we were doing mediumship, and she's like, I just can't get it. Well, no, we were doing an intuitive heart retreat. And of course, I believe that, in my own experience, all my abilities popped open when I experienced divine love, you know. And I think, that when I was young, I had some out of body experiences because I can remember flying through the house and that kind of thing. But then that gets lost in life. But yeah, I think that spiritual awakening is so important, which deepens our connection with spirit. And I always like to say, I went looking for God and I got everybody else along the way, you know. And so going that invitation straight to the top to say, okay, I want to know you're real. I want to understand and know truth, which is all of us have been on that journey. What's the truth of the afterlife? What's the, you know, and have experienced that. So it's such a key component, I think, of the spiritual awakening of recognizing that we are not a body. So any thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it was an out of body experience as well that totally put the nail in that coffin that yes, we're so much more than that. I've never been as adept at it as Gary has described some of his experiences, but I've gotten out. and, floated in my own bedroom kind of a thing. And it's an experience, the vibrational state that Gary was kind of also describing. This is, it feels like laying on railroad tracks to me. But that's why I never got very far, because usually if I hit that vibrational state, it was kind of shocking experience. And so it would tend to knock me out. But I finally did hang in long enough a few times that I have experienced being outside of my body. And it's a learnable skill. I mean, like, I didn't know for sure if it could be learned, but there's lots of books written about it, right? And so, if anything, I'm a pretty decent student. And I started reading and doing the exercises that they described. And sure enough, you can get out, at least
That,
temporarily,
yeah. And that's
until it's,
funny. That's exactly what happened to me, Sally, is the first time I got out, it was in my bedroom.
yeah,
And I was afraid to leave the bedroom. So there was fear there,
right.
and, but I turned around and I didn't see my body laying there. Milt was laying there in the bed, but I wasn't. And there was this light coming up out of the bed. And I'm going, what is that? And I go tiptoe over and look down to see what the light was coming out of the bed. And it was like a television screen of Mickey Mouse cartoons. And it made me laugh. And so I think it took a little fear away. And then I popped right back in my body and the vibrations were there. It's not something I've practiced. So it would be fun, Gary, at some point to hear all your experiences, and let's do a roundtable on out of body experiences. And I think that would be really fun. But that's, like my mom coming to visit, she was out of her body and she was in her right mind when she was out of her body. That's what surprised me. She had dementia here, but she didn't out of her body, which made me think, how long has she been popping in and out of her body with her mind the way it is, which gave me a lot of comfort thinking, well, she's not stuck in that body where her brain doesn't work.
Right. The dementia is a physical manifestation, not a spiritual manifestation. So the spirit's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and oftentimes, when dementia sets in, people will come and go. They'll be in body, out of body. And also, when you were talking about not leaving your room, this is very common. People often are afraid to leave their room. I remember my mother, when she was alive, calling me excitedly one morning saying, I got out of my body last night. I floated around the bedroom. I could see myself. I could see Ed lying in bed. And, I felt so light and wonderful. But she never left the room. And realizing you're safe, you're connected to that body. If you find yourself in an out of body experience, and this is for the listener, it's okay to venture further. Start small, go down the block. I remember one out of body experiencer when he first started, found himself in his room out of body. So he decided to go down and look at license plates on cars in the street. And he did, and then went back to his body, woke up, got up and went out and checked, and they were the same cars and license plate numbers that he had seen in the out of body state. So you can experiment with it. You don't have to venture real far at first, but then you come to realize that there are no limits.
Mm-hmm. Makes me, and I haven't done out of body work in a long time just because life has been, kept me in my body doing my work. But I'm thinking, now, wouldn't it be cool to get out of my body and see what's going on with that vortex here at the Casa? Could I see things that I wouldn't be able to see in physical body going on, So that might have to be an adventure I might have to work on. But there have been a lot, and I'm sure you guys have done this a lot. There's been a lot of times where you've had dreams where you're flying. I have
Oh, yeah.
flying dreams all the time, and I'm always avoiding the electric lines. It's like, no, 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 I'm not going to go around that electric line. And so I know that I'm out of my body. I'm just not consciously making it happen. which then that goes into, well, it's cool. If you can learn how to do that, then you can go visit loved ones. Have you, either of
Right.
you done that?
I have had lucid dream states where I've had loved ones show up as well, yes. And those are, to me, that is just a shift from a slightly unconscious dream state to a fully conscious dream state, and being able to bring that consciousness back with you as you return to your body. But yes, and just because we're talking about dreaming, there's a really sweet spot just as you're going to sleep, falling asleep, and just as you're waking up, the hypnagogic and the hypnopompic states. And I've had so much spirit communication in that state, I can't even begin to count how many times. One time I woke up, well, I say I woke up, I was in that state and found myself having a conversation with a woman who I knew several years before, who the last time I'd seen her, she had dementia. And I hadn't seen or talked to her since then, but suddenly she was there and talking to me saying, "I'm sorry that I didn't recognize you the last time I saw you." And I'm like, "That's okay. It's not a problem." And I asked her about her grandson, who I knew was on the other side. She's like, "He's here." I wasn't even consciously aware that she had passed at this point. But I called her daughter the next day to say, "Hey, I woke up feeling like I was having a conversation with your mom. I hope she's doing okay." Well, then I found out, no, she'd passed a couple of months before, and she was there just to visit and say she was sorry she didn't recognize me the last time, you know? But I hope that that conversation maybe was important to her daughter, perhaps, and the ability for me to check in and say, "Hey, I was talking to your mom. How's she
That's,
doing?" You know, that's a really good place to become aware of passing through that hypnagogic, hypnopompic state, because you can definitely experience a lot of
connect
things there.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gary.
I don't want to get too far into it now because we'll save this for the episode on out-of-body experiences, but I'll also bring along some techniques I've used that can help you because if you're in a full conscious out-of-body state, you can remember your phone number. You can remember your social security number. You have full consciousness. But there are degrees where it's a little hazier, where you're not quite there, but there are techniques to sharpen that. And I'm going to save that for a future discussion because I think that's vitally important for anyone that wants to try it. So,
Yeah. So we've got a pin in that one. We're going to do an episode on out of body experiences. So let's, in the minutes we have remaining, let's talk a little bit about the external signs, because I think a lot of times our loved ones will connect with this externally because we aren't awakened on the physical level, or we're not ready to go there, but they'll bring us signs from the spiritual world uh, externally to get us to realize, trying to get us to realize they're okay. So, who wants to share a story of that?
You want to go first this time, Gary? We both
go
had
ahead.
experiences.
Go ahead.
Uh, well, for me, the ones that are the most sort of surprising are either, well, there's two that just knock my socks off every time they happen. One is objects that go missing that reappear, so, sometimes weeks later, where they belonged and where you looked 100 times, right? And nobody else moved them, took them. So I've had that experience several times of objects. And then the recognition after checking all the possible things I could check, checking with my husband, checking, with anybody else who's been in the house. "Oh, did you find this and put it back?" And everybody's like, "Nope, nope, nope." Then you go, "Okay, there's something more to that. That's a sign. Thank you." And I always try to say thank you. But they're using technology more and more and more. And the ways they're coming through technology just are astonishing. And that could be a whole nother discussion as well. But they'll use cell phones, they'll use anything electrical that they can flick on and off, that they can ping in ways that maybe even can spell out words, those kinds of things. They're becoming more and more common, and more people are starting to acknowledge and recognize them.
Very cool. Gary.
Well, I've had a few, but the one that comes to mind just happened the other night, so I'll share it. And we were in an exercise to go to that state just shy of the spirit world, but it's that in-between state. Some call it Bardos, some call it different things. And to look at the scenery, and this was in the using imagination actually to tie in with that. And I kept seeing this giant white rabbit. I mean, giant, as tall as a person. And I couldn't figure it out. It's like, why am I seeing this white rabbit? In a few minutes after we came out of the exercise, a woman was talking about her experience, and she held up a book, and it was Through the Looking Glass. So sorry about that. I didn't
There's
direct
technology for you.
fireworks.
Well, maybe it wasn't an accident. So,
so little things like that, you have to be open to the subtle, because they will give you signs, but they can only do it to a certain extent. So from the spirit world, Sally and I get this one all the time, the number 1111. And in fact, this morning, I look at the clock, it's 11:11. My phone dings, it's Sally sending me a text saying it's 11:11. So we both happen to notice it. And it's not like once in a while, it's like every day almost, or several times a week. Sally, you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's just telling my understanding of that message is just you're on the right track. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Keep paying attention.
absolutely. Okay. Do you have any stories of license plates messages? Who's
Oh, that's
got
a
the story?
good one. You know what? I have not actively been at least recording. Every now and then I've kind of picked at one, but I have a friend whose son is so spectacular at sending her license plate messages over and over and over again. So I do find that our loved ones, they'll do a couple of things. They'll specialize in a particular kind of sign that they might happen to be good at. And in this case, that young man is good at getting his mom in the presence of license plates, right? But they'll do the things that they keep learning on the other side. They'll do the things they've learned to do. And so, but signs I may get from my son may be different than the types of signs I get from my dad because they have a little different skill set, or slightly different helpers from the other side. Because I do find that they do get a lot of help if they want to in placing those signs before us.
Yeah.
So,
and how they make that happen, I have no idea. But I've gotten a couple. Milt got one when he was living in Virginia Beach. And he woke up a long time ago. His wife, Mary Jane, passed away of leukemia, but he has a fun journey. He had quit his job in Virginia Beach after working there as a CEO for like 14 years. And he's sitting at a Dunkin' Donuts and he had two job offers. One was in Florida and one was in New York City. And he's saying, okay, where am I supposed to go? One was a newspaper job with Sun newspaper and the other, I forgot what it was. And just as he's thinking that thought, a car from Florida pulls up that says Sun City right in front of where he's sitting eating donuts. And so he chose to go to Florida. Had he not chose to go to Florida, we would have never met. So the universe brought that sign through a license plate, that said, that's the way you're supposed to go. And he followed it. He didn't say, well, isn't that just a quinky dink, So, Gary, do you have any license plates signs?
I've had a couple of experiences where I'll think about somebody who's transitioned and I'll see within a day or two that name show up on a license plate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I guess I have. I also get butterflies. It's like I can say, okay, send me a butterfly. And the butterfly will just keep circling me and, sometimes land on me. Um, so, and it's my understanding that they actually kind of go to school to learn how to do this stuff on the other side. They're actually courses that they can take to learn how to communicate with this slow, dense, frequency of the earth plane because they're vibrating at a much faster pace, as you know, which is the difficulty in communication because often what they send us is so fast. It's so quick that you have to be aware to catch it. So, um, but other than that, not a whole lot of license plate stuff, but I'm open to whatever they choose to send. I try and be aware.
Right. Very good. As you were talking, I was thinking that, a lot of times mediums, what we do is we raise our vibration to be able, as they lower theirs, so we can communicate. That's why I think the spiritual journey and awakening and healing ourselves and getting rid of the fear and the clogged emotions in our body and that kind of thing, so we can vibrate at a higher level. I think the more you do, the more you have those experiences. I don't know about you guys, it's like I'm so comfortable with death after doing this work for 30 years. It's like, oh, they graduated, they got out of here, the pain and suffering planet. And I get so excited when someone passes over thinking, boy, are they having a good time, and then we're stuck here, trudging through the density and the feelings and the emotions and the lower vibrations. But if people could learn that people who have passed over in the afterlife and you lost someone is a gift to your awakening, and that somehow I always feel, Sally and Gary, that we agreed to that, before we came in. We agreed to go through that experience because that was going to be the catalyst to get us out, our heads out of the sand, and start looking up. So let's see, we've just got a few minutes left. Any parting shots, which makes me think of this company that they cremate people and put them in bullets, and they call it parting shots, and you can shoot your loved one out into the forest, But any parting information you would like to share about the subject of afterlife? I mean, we could go on and on and on.
Well, one thing,
Yes.
please never put me in a bullet and shoot me out across
Okay,
the.
we won't. Yes.
So, I would just say eliminate fear, open your heart, get out of your head, more in your heart, because your heart actually has brain cells in it. It actually has brain cells. So do, and people say, well, I think I get it. It's like I had this awakening, but then I go back to my old self. Yes, that's going to happen because you are having a human experience here. Don't be frustrated by that. What you'll find is faster and faster, you'll catch yourself and go, oh, I slipped into being Gary the human. And I forgot my spiritual heritage and what I actually am. More and more, that time frame lessens as we'll catch ourselves to where I think it's ultimately you just always in the background, you're aware of your true nature. And that's the goal we want to get to. And I really feel that love is the most important thing on the planet, not love as we normally speak of it, but unconditional love. I hate to use that phrase because it's overused, but it's apt for what I'm trying to express. So, yeah, and I always say to people, you don't have to like everyone. It's okay to have different frequencies that don't mesh, but you can still love them. And it doesn't mean you have to be around them, but so try the exercise of coming from the heart, loving everyone you meet
Mm.
in the grocery store, hold that door for the elderly person trying to come through with a walker, whatever it is. Those little acts herald through the universe.
Very good. Yeah, I always like to tell people that there's only one prayer or two, one prayer you only need to say to God is, show me what divine love, let me experience divine love and bring me to peace. You know, oftentimes our little ego mind tries to control everything, but just say, I really want to experience divine love. And when you have that experience of divine love, that's the transformational energy that does the work in you instead of you having to do the work to get there. It is that invitation. So go ahead, Sally. What's
Oh,
your
you know what? I just have one little piece of practical advice for people who want to connect to their loved ones. And that is much like I think Gary said it before. It might have been you, Susan, about asking. Put an ask out there, send it with love to them, and let go of any expectations of what that sign might be. And don't even dwell on it through your day. You just go about your day, go about your week, and see what pops up for you. Because more often than not, what they can do to reach you is more amazing than anything you could have thought of yourself. And so just give them the opportunity to do that and see what happens.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
especially if it's a teenager who is mischievous, they will come in very fun ways to let you know, hey mom, hey dad, I'm okay. I want you to know I'm alive, I'm well, I'm happy,
Yeah,
and keep going in life, and I'll see you when I see you. So,
right. And that love that you and Gary were just talking about, that's the bond that
mhm.
remains, whether you're an avatar or fitting into an avatar here in the physical world or whether or not you've graduated onto the next field of experience.
Yeah,
So that
very
love will
cool.
keep you together.
It is love that heals. All right, let's end it there. And thank you guys very much. This was really fun. And you guys out there know you're loved. And we hope you enjoyed this little roundtable discussion. And we've got some more to come. So have a good day, everyone.